Valorant is going to have some forgotten agents. Those agents are called Deadlock and Sage. And let me tell you why they're about to be completely forgotten. You see, it all starts with when Riot introduced an agent called Vice. Because Vice is a similar sort of agent to Deadlock and Sage. They're all sentinels, they all have a kind of wall. But the thing is, one of them, Vice, is way better than the other two. So let me explain why this is a big problem, and we're probably going to need some changes to Deadlock and Sage pretty soon, because Vice is essentially just, hey, what if we made a barrier sentinel like Deadlock and Sage, but what if we made it actually pretty good? That's what Vice is. You want a wall that's indestructible? Vice has it, Sage and Deadlock don't. Right? You want a signature ability that's actually useful? Vice has it, Sage and Deadlock don't. You want an ability that can recharge that you can use at the start of the round? Vice has it, Deadlock and Sage don't. Do you want a signature ability that recharges after just 20 seconds and gives you a flash and gives you information, an idea that we definitely know is very strong and had to nerf an agent who had a flash that gave you information at the start of the year because it was so strong? Do you want that agent? Yes, give me Vice, who has that. And no, Deadlock and Sage don't have anything like that. Now, this is not to say that Deadlock and Sage are completely useless agents. In fact, we have seen, particularly towards the end of the season, everyone but Sentinels who played Deadlock can find some Deadlock value, and there have been some pretty nice Deadlock games and Deadlock rounds, and that's great. But that is playing on patches before Vice was an available option, and on the whole, Vice is so much more flexible, and just in general, so much better than those other agents that I don't really see why you would ever want to probably pick Deadlock or Sage over a Vice. And look, Deadlock and Sage in ranked are okay, right? Particularly lower down in the ranks, they're a decent option because generally people just tend to run to a site, and walling off that site and making them shoot that and giving time for rotates is pretty decent because that's how most ranked games, particularly at the lower ranks, worked. And so maybe in low ranks they're fine, but the game isn't balanced around low ranks, right? You can go and look at pretty much all the changes that Riot has ever made, and it's balanced around the high level gameplay, right? That is what they want people to aspire to, and so that's what they balance the game around. And in high level play and high level pro play, especially Sage and Deadlock, they ain't that good. And it would not surprise me at all if that got even worse once Vice is actually introduced into the pro play scene as well, that Sage and Deadlock's pick rate might literally go back to 0%. So with that in mind, what do we need to do to help Sage and Deadlock become a viable option? And to me, it really does come down to their signature abilities. Signature abilities are really important for an agent's strength in the game of Valorant. In fact, if you go back in your mind and think about the most broken agents that you can remember in Valorant's history, I can bet that most of them, probably their signature ability was a key reason why they were so broken, right? That is just the way it works because your signature ability is an ability that you get every round no matter what. You don't have to buy it, and so every single round, no matter the round, you're going to use that ability, and therefore it's very important. It's kind of the key of the character's strength is their signature ability. The thing is, Deadlock and Sage have very, very bad signature abilities for a couple of reasons. Now, the first problem that both these agents have in terms of their signature ability is that they don't really refresh. Now, Sage's does, and I'll get to that in a second, but let's start with Deadlock, because Deadlock is one of the few agents in the game who in no shape or form can get any recharges of their utility. And that is a problem because refreshable utility is really, really good, right? Especially in pro play where things are a little bit slower, right? That means that, hey, if I use an ability at the start of the round, I can still get another charge of it later on in the round and then use it again. And so I just have more utility, and obviously having more utility is good, right? But Deadlock just doesn't have access to that whatsoever. And some of you might be saying and thinking, well, Sage does have a refreshable charge of her utility, but not really. Because the thing is, Sage's signature ability is a heal. And when you use that heal, it has a 45-second cooldown. The thing is, everyone at the start of the round starts with full health, and therefore you can't really ever use it at the start of the round. So it essentially isn't really a refreshable bit of utility, because by the time that someone has taken damage and they have to have survived that damage and then get to you as the Sage for you then to heal them back, at that point you have to wait another 45 seconds to use it, but you might have already been waiting a minute to use it the first time anyway, meaning that the round is going to end before you actually get the chance to use it the second time. And again, think about the chances of using it a second time. That means a second time in a round, someone has to take a fight but survive that fight and take damage, and then you have to find them and heal them, you know, or it could be yourself, I suppose, as well. But that's unlikely to happen more than once in a round anyway. And then you compare that to Vice, who not only has a 20-second cooldown on her signature ability, but it's also a really strong ability that we know is very good, right? A flash which gives information. Well, there was an agent that also had a flash that gives information that had to be heavily nerfed because it was so strong. And so what can we do? How would I go about fixing Sage and Deadlock? Because I do think they're in a lot of trouble if they don't get some kind of substantial buffs. Now, we've already seen Riot yesterday. They went to Astra, they went to Chamber, two pretty struggling agents, and they gave them pretty significant buffs, in my opinion, that will make them somewhat viable. And I think that's what we need for both Sage and Deadlock as well. But it can't just be buffs of what already exists because of those kind of fundamental problems with their signature abilities. I think it has to be a little bit of a rework. And the rework that I would propose is they actually need to change what the signature ability is for Deadlock and Sage. They need to change Deadlock's signature from the barrier to the Gravnet, and they need to change Sage's signature ability from the heal to the slow, right? What this would then give these agents is you could then have a cooldown on a slow orb for a Sage of, let's say, 45 seconds to keep it in line with most Sentinels. But if you had a 45-second cooldown of a slow orb, you can use a slow orb at the start of the round. That's fine, right? And then in 45 seconds, you can have another one. And that's fine. And the same is true for Deadlock. Now, some of you, I know, will say, hold on, TMV, the Gravnet, especially even in high-level play, is a really, really good ability. Like, it's really, really strong. And so having that be refreshable, wouldn't that just kind of be a bit broken? And I somewhat agree with you. Yes, having a refreshable Gravnet especially would be quite strong indeed. And so what I would say is, well, you could probably nerf the Gravnet back to its old size, right? It doesn't have to be that massive as it is now. You can nerf it back to its old size to kind of compensate, but I think overall having multiple Gravnets in a round would be more ideal than just having one very big one. And some of you might be a bit wary about these changes and say, that sounds actually a bit strong, particularly for lower ranks. The thing is, though, you can always tone down other aspects of their kit, right? Whether that's how many bullets the walls take to break, whether that's nerfing the ults and making them 8, 9 cost, whatever it may be. You can always tone down other aspects because the truth of the matter is these agents need to be strong. The reason that Sage and Deadlock need to be strong is because they don't fulfill any of the necessary requirements for a Valorant team comp. When you think of a Valorant team comp, you think of some things that you must have, right? We must have smokes. We're probably going to need some kind of movement ability to get into a site. We're probably going to want some flashes. We're probably going to need some kind of recon to re-clear areas. We might also want some kind of sentinel trap utility to cover our flanks, right? Sage and Deadlock don't guarantee any of those things. They don't have those things. And so they are luxury agents that you're adding in, and the rest of your team comp kind of needs to fulfill most of those other things without them, right? So if they're going to be a luxury agent that you add in, well, then they gotta be strong, right? To actually warrant picking them. And I'm sure that there are some other ideas out there of how you'd want to buff these agents, particularly Deadlock. Sage, I actually don't know how else you would buff Sage, to be honest. But when it comes to Deadlock, a lot of people want the sonic sensors to be, you know, basically Cypher trips. I think that's a terrible idea, to be honest. Like, at that point, you've just made Cypher, but probably a bit better. So I think that this is perhaps the one way of keeping the agent identities, you know, intact, essentially, and not stepping on anyone else's toes, but also giving them a significant buff.